Hi everybody, it's Endor from ECF. I'd like to show you today my technique for rewicking the Vivi Nova tanks with 100% cotton wick. The technique I'm going to be demonstrating today is actually to use a pull-through technique for the wick. So in other words, you're going to build the coil on a screw and pull the wick through. That seems to be the most consistent way to do this and have a consistent result. I've done probably 20 or 30 of these now, and they all work very, very well and very consistently. So to get started, what you're going to need is, obviously you're going to need, I use Canthal, I use 32 gauge Canthal. You're going to need a 256 screw. Now these are sometimes hard to find in hardware stores. What this is actually a push rod end for a remote control airplane. A company called Dubro, D-U-B-R-O, sells these. They also sell pieces of rod with this thread on the end of it. It seems to be the perfect size and the perfect thread. It's very, very tightly threaded. Seems to work very, very well. So if you go to a hobby store that specializes in remote control airplanes or the like, you should be able to find either a rod or something along this line. I use a pair of fingernail clippers for clipping off the ends, a lighter for dealing with the Canthal, and forgot the wick. This is actually Peaches and Cream number 4 white cotton thread, cotton yarn. Picked this up from Walmart. What I do is I take a bunch of it, I boil it for about 30 minutes, and then I just cut off about 2-inch pieces. This is right around 2 inches. This is again pre-boiled. 30 minutes, change the water a couple times, make sure you get all the sizing off. It does make a difference. And then of course we need a head that's due for rebuilding. I also find it easily, if you see over here I've got a vise. I use the vise to hold this so that I can have both hands free as I'm doing my coiling. I'll show you that in a second. Okay, the first thing that I'll do is demonstrate my little thread puller. You can make this just out of Canthal. If you have a spare piece laying around, that works well too. I usually just cut off a piece about 3 or 4 inches, something like that. And what you're going to do is you're going to take this and you're going to just make a loop out of it. It can be a little tricky. Make a loop like this and then just twist it together. And that makes a loop with an end on it. We use to pull our yarn through the coil. Okay, cut off a piece, about a 6-inch piece of Canthal, and you're going to want to heat trim for this. How we do that is just run a lighter under it until it glows red hot, pretty much immediately. This is important, otherwise it's just too springy to work with. You can see it's kind of glowing there as I'm going along. I usually just go up and back. Okay, take your 256 screw or coupling or whatever you have. It could also be, like I said, they do sell them in bars or in rods with this thread on it. Now we're going to take our Canthal and we're going to start wrapping it around the screw. I do 6 wraps, which gives me about 2.8 ohms. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now you try not to miss any threads. And what I like to do is I like to actually do this again. This kind of sets the coil and seems to make it a bit more resilient. Keep that tight, and now unscrew it off of the rod. It's not too bad. Makes a nice coil. Key here is try not to skip any of the threads. I find that if the coil is very consistent and tight, that it seems to vape better on the cotton. If there's a lot of gaps, it seems to not work quite as well. So this technique using this has worked very consistently for me, and it's almost like a factory type thing. Before you do this next step, I suggest you wash your hands, make sure they're good and clean, as you can affect the juice. You're messing with the wicks, or the flavor of the juice. So what I do is I take my 2 inches roughly of number 4 and I pull the threads apart. There we go. I get all 4 apart. So what I do is I kind of line them up again. Take the ends, kind of line them up. Take the little needle threader you made before, pop it through, and then just kind of pull it back like this. Okay, so now you've got it through the needle threader. Okay, take your needle threader, pinch it down a little bit, and then you're going to want to feed it through the coil. It can be a little tricky. There we go. Okay. Now, take the coil, slide it up. I'm going to switch this because slide it up onto the wick. There we go. It's going to be tight where it's doubled up there. So there we go. Once you get it past that, you can then remove this and then just center it onto the wicks. Okay, let's take our head apart, pop the cap off, take the center pin out, and just pull that out like that. Pop the grommet off like that, and then the wicks and the coil just come out. Okay. What I normally do is I take a unbent paper clip and I slide it right along between the coil and the wick like that. And this helps hold it centered when we're putting it in the head, which we're going to do right now. So just feed both wires through. Make sure that these 2 wires here do not cross, otherwise they will short and will not work properly. Alright, there we go. So, kind of center it in there a little bit. You don't want the coil touching the sides of the cup there. Alright, great. Now, take your grommet and slide it. I usually grab the long one, the long tail, just because it doesn't matter. You're actually going to put the tail through the hole in the grommet, through the center of it. Let's see, this is where that's going to help. Oop. And try to keep it on there. It's hard to do. There we go. All right. Small wires we're working with here. Okay, so pop the grommet. So put one of the tails through the grommet, pop it in like that. Okay. Now, make sure you're still kind of centered in here. You got some playroom here. There we go. Good. Now, what I like to do is take your center pin and you just pop it right in there. Push. I usually see how my hands are. I push against the. I kind of push against the paper clip to hold it centered while I push this in. There we go. Now, what I did here was not really good. I got them kind of on the same side, but that's all right. Okay, let's see how we're doing here. Kind of moved a little bit, see? That's okay. Take the magic tool and just pop it over. There we go. See, not touching the sides. That's what you want. Get rid of these tails. I use nail clippers. Some people I know roll them off. I've never had luck with that. I just use fingernail clippers. No, these don't. I do not use these to clip my fingernails. I just use it for this purpose only. They're what, $1.50. So I just, it's nice because you can get right up against the base and snip it. Okay. Cap. Back on. Make sure the wicks are kind of centered. Make sure you don't move your coil. That is ready to go. I hope you found that helpful. You're probably curious, how does it vape? Well, as you can see here, I'm actually running low on juice. So this is actually a worst case scenario. So there you go. Great vapor, fantastic flavor, very, very good. This coil's about a week old, so probably getting time, but still vape's great. Couple hints and tricks when you're starting to do this. Number one, do not let the cotton run dry under no circumstances. Make sure it's good and wet. Even when you're checking ohms, like on a Provari, it pretty much puts full voltage to it, so you want to make sure you put a drop or so on the coil. Make sure it lets it soak in really nicely. Secondly, on a fresh new coil, you'll probably notice the first few vapes are just a touch, flavorless, not as much flavor, maybe a little of a cottony flavor. Don't worry about that. After a good 5-10 vapes, certainly after the first quarter tank or so on a large Vivi like this, you're going to start getting the flavor. It's going to really start breaking in and give you a nice flavor, nice vapor. Give it a try. If you are concerned, as I was, about the silica and the shards that have been kind of going around the forums, this is a nice way to vape. It's easy to rebuild. It's cheap. You can't really beat it. So I'm Endor from the ECF again, and I want to thank you very much for watching.